I am surprised at your complete and utter lack of insight. You'd think reason would be the main thing behind someone who chooses not to believe in God, reason, logic, yet you implore neither of these things. Your education is actually the perpetuation of bias, and it requires some counter-education, which I hope to provide here. In fact, in your education, you're perpetuating bias in the same manner that Christians or any other religious person might. You're throwing out blatant subjections, generalizations, sweeping generalizations. And both of these are completely the opposite of what I would consider, and I think what any reasonable man would consider to be logical. You say that atheists are Christians without balls, but many reasonable men I've talked to have echoed my same thoughts. Agnostics, if one is to be honest with themselves, are the ones that embrace the thing closest to the truth, because there is no proof either way that there is or isn't a God. There's no way to prove something doesn't exist, and in this case there's no proof that it does exist or doesn't exist necessarily. So one would have to default to the belief that we do not know if there is a God. Yet you as an atheist seem to have faith that there is no God without proof. And I don't see how that is any different than someone who chooses to put faith in God. And both have to do this on faith due to the lack of evidence that God either does or doesn't exist. First of all, your blames are completely misguided. You blame entire institutions and belief systems. I wonder who else does that. What kind of belief system or institution would Christians blame? They do a lot of blaming, don't they? Seems you do too. Let's talk first about your sweeping generalizations. Now, the reason why generalizations, when you make them, are wrong is because in order for them to be right, you would have to survey the entire group of people you're talking about, and 100% of them would have to fall in line with whatever you are suggesting that all of these people seem to do. One of your generalizations is that people are hurt by religion, but I don't think you've met every religious person. I'm sure there are plenty of religious people that are, bettered by religion. I haven't seen anyone who's happy with religion, therefore they must not exist because I've met everyone in the world. Not only that, but do you realize that you're interpreting these people's definitions of happy? Maybe they considered themselves to be happy, but you've interpreted them to be sad. One of the very unreasonable claims you make is that you blame Mormonism for the death of your friend. The people who should be blamed, of course, are the parents. Not only are they the ones that refused to let her have a blood transfusion, but they're the ones who made the personal choice to conform to Mormonism in the first place. And then we've got your racist friend. He also made a personal decision to join the religion, and then made a personal decision to become racist, and those two are not interlinked. Would you propose that every Mormon is racist? Then how can you blame the religion for making him racist? It was a personal choice he made. People who aren't religious can be racist too. Therefore, your argument is completely flawed. You say you want people to do research and find out about the religion. Well, I've done that research, and yet I still believe, personally. I would be lying if I said my faith hasn't changed because of it, but it remains nonetheless. Another thing you do is say preachers don't want you to know the truth, so I would take that by suggesting they're basically preaching their own agenda. Well, you've got an agenda too. We all have agendas. And I think that a preacher's agenda and your agenda are equally biased and subjective in their own rights. Another funny thing you do is you tell us how your life has changed since your conversion to atheism. And you list ways your life has gotten better, but the things you list have little or nothing to do with your atheism. They revolve around the choices you've made as to how to view people in society. You say you trust people less. Well, I could trust people less and still be a Christian or believe in God. It has nothing to do with my religion. It has to do with just how you view people as a whole. Another sweeping, flawed generalization you make, as all generalizations are flawed, as I discussed, is that all cops are corrupt. That's simply not true. not all police officers are corrupt. If you did a survey of all police officers, you would find that they're not corrupt, actually. I know in my town that there is a percentage of police officers that are corrupt, but most of them seem to be doing their jobs pretty well and get on with very little complaints. Again, you're using the worst of a group of people to generalize the entire group, the same as you've done with Christians and Muslims, with the killing and the stealing. This is all very illogical of you, and I assume it's by logic that you decided to come to your belief in atheism. But where's the logic in sweeping generalizations of people based on the worst of those people within those groups? That's as goddamn ignorant as saying all black people commit crime. By the way, did you know that according to the Justice Department, over 60% of crime is committed by white people? That means the percentage of races that commit crime is approximately equal to their distribution within the population. Kind of blows away all stereotypes, doesn't it? And I believe the stereotypes you suggest are equally as ignorant and false. Another sweeping generalization you make. Religions teach people not to question things. Well, it seems you, like most atheists, are not familiar with all religions. Most of you seem to concentrate almost exclusively on Christianity, which I find funny. But ignoring those other religions which don't teach you not to question, let's turn to my little book of Jesus quotes. I went through and looked for the number of times that Jesus himself asked a question. Oh, what an all-knowing being. I guess he won't ask questions, huh? Well, he does, and here's the example of a few. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Why do you notice the speck of dust in your brother's eye and not the wooden plank in your own? You know, I think that one would apply to you because you use similar biases and subjections to prove your point just as religious people often do. What is the realm of God like? How can I describe it to you? Look, I could go on and on and on and on with quotes of Jesus asking questions, challenging people to think. Just because the majority of preachers seem to be conservatives, it doesn't mean the religion promotes people not to ask questions. I think that clearly it does. There are people who would rather you not ask questions, rather you follow them. And it is the people that are corrupt, not the religion. That is what I found because of my research. You look at all your research, it's people that do things that are corrupt. So you said to make a video and see if you're wrong. Well, I'm going to say that you are wrong because you've made sweeping generalizations in order to prove your point. These are logical fallacies. You say people are hurt by religion, another extreme generalization. You blame religion for the death of your friend as a child, another sweeping generalization. The parents could be to blame. You blame religion for your friend becoming a racist. Again, that was a personal choice he made. You make the sweeping generalization that Christians and Muslims, all they do is fucking kill people. Again, there are plenty of examples, and plenty of Christians and Muslims alike who've not killed people. Again, you're generalizing an entire group of people based on the worst possible sample of them. So, at the end of the day, I've done the research you'd like to suggest that I do, and yet, here I am, still believing. What does that tell you? Well, that tells me that this subject is vastly, subjective. A person can look at the facts, interpret them, and come upon their own conclusion. And I believe you come upon your own conclusion, and I believe other people come upon their own conclusions. They may not be as reasonable as you and I. I'm sorry, I'd like to apologize for that statement. I seem to have made a mistake. I called you reasonable, which you've proven by this post that you're not. But even being reasonable, one can come upon a vast array of conclusions concerning the existence of God. And if we are to be completely and utterly reasonable, then we must say that there's no proof that God either does or doesn't exist, and therefore must default at agnostic, the most reasonable position there is on the belief of God. It's not my goal here to prove that God exists, just to prove that you are not being reasonable in your assertions, which should be plainly obvious to any reasonable individual. You and theists alike are not immune to flawed beliefs. So overall, this was a very biased, very subjective post, and I think all your arguments were flawed because you implore sweeping generalizations to prove many of your points, and you need to come at this from a completely different angle before you bring up any valid evidence that we should believe anything that you say.